I can honestly say I never really thought seriously about any other job, and I think when I was a kid I was quite fascinated by news, and I used to watch things like John Craven's News Round, and I actually got a letter read out and got a little badge when I was 8, so maybe there was something there. The thing about City was it was a really useful bridge year. I mean, I knew I wanted to be a journalist. I'd done a lot of student journalism at Oxford, but I didn't get onto the BBC News trainee scheme that year. I got into the final sort of shortlist and not quite into the course. And they recommended City, and I'd thought about it anyway. And it was just a really great transition because you got to think about the job and you got to think about placements. And although I did the newspaper course, I didn't feel you were forced into any particular area, and it was just a great opportunity to network. We were very near all the newspapers and broadcasters, and I just found after a few months on it, you just felt you were closer to your job than you were when you started out as a student. No, it was a really interesting time, and I think about the people I met on the course. Lots of them are still friends, and it was terrific. I mean, I look at we had to do a sort of topic and do a little researched piece, and I did it about something, you could argue strangely prescient, but actually I think pointless, which was about ethnicity and newscasters. And I wish I hadn't actually. I wish I'd done it about something that was substantial. My experience at City was quite interesting because I went on to the newspaper course thinking I'm going to go into print journalism, but I actually came out and went onto the BBC News trainee course, and in that sense my City course was not a direct preparation for the job I did, but the BBC trainee course was. I think what was great about City was it was an opportunity to think about the job you were doing, and there was a big drive to generate stories. So in the news course, I remember being sent out to just different areas of London, and they deliberately sent you to areas you didn't know and told to come back with 3 news stories. And that was basic stuff about pounding the streets and finding interesting tales. And it wasn't all sitting theorising about the impact of Orson Welles' War of the Worlds, though we had that aspect too. And there was really inspiring teaching, and a lot of it is just that opportunity to think about the profession and to think about what you're doing. If I have any concern now, it might be that because technology is so much more central to how it all operates, that perhaps it distracts a little from the issues and how we treat stories. And I think that's the most important aspect of thinking about a career in journalism. Well, as someone who's worked at the BBC before, the thing about Channel 4 News is, one, part of ITN, which is an incredibly powerful news brand, and to someone of my generation who grew up with ITN News and the BBC is these two incredibly important, serious attitudes to news. It's a great honour to work for that brand, and I felt the same about the BBC. But the thing about the Channel 4 News programme in particular is it is just this amazing exotic little fruit on a very rare tree, you could say, and that to have made it here, you kind of made it to almost the best programme there is in broadcasting. And the BBC is a huge broadcaster, but when you consider how small Channel 4 and ITN are, this programme carries such weight, I think, and how it's regarded. It does serious news, it does it well. We have the ability to take risks, to do something a bit different because we're not the BBC. And everyone here, you look at everyone who works in this programme, and they are at the top of their game, and they work really hard. And it's an unexpected bonus as well, as it's the most incredibly positive and friendly atmosphere of any newsroom I've ever worked in, and you don't expect that in a place which is so hard and serious about news, but it's a very lucky place to work. The biggest problem is that the news industry is just an industry like any other, and there's an awful lot of pressure, particularly in the independent sector, because of the fall in advertising revenue. So our jobs are ultimately dependent on how much soap powder is sold, and that's always a worry because that's a factor out of your control. But what we can control is how we cover stories and showing that news is still essential. And I've heard people say that the TV news bulletin is dead or dying, and that may be the case in America, but I think in this country we're quite privileged that thanks to the history of the BBC and ITN, there is still a very high expectation in this country of good independent news where editorial decisions are made on the viewer's behalf with the viewer's best interests at heart. And I think as long as you stay true to that principle, that's all we can really do. I mean, the only other thing I'd say is I'm wary about the impact of technology, and what worries me about very young journalists entering the profession now is when I started, there were great trainee schemes like the BBC, most of which have been shut down. Now there's a great pressure to go into very low-paying or even free aspects of journalism, like blogging, some of the online stuff, where I've yet to see it actually earns you any money. And my big worry is that, are MOOC jobs taking over journalism, and are kind of the good jobs that should be there, are they disappearing?